grade, welcome back. I hope that everyone is doing well and that you've been having a chance to enjoy this incredible weather we're having because it's been so lovely out recently. So getting out and taking walks, maybe riding your bike or something, of course while practicing social distancing. But yeah, I hope you all are doing well. This video is going to be about finding common denominators. Common denominators is something that becomes super important and super relevant when adding and subtracting fractions. We don't really need it when multiplying and dividing fractions because you just kind of multiply across. But with adding and subtracting fractions, we need to make sure that our denominator, that our bottom number, is the same in both the numbers, or I guess really all of the numbers if you're adding 3 or more fractions together. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so I suppose that the first question we have to answer is, why is having common denominators important? Why is it valuable? If we don't need it in multiplying fractions, why do we need it in adding and subtracting fractions? Why can't we just smush the two fractions together and then they're added? And where it becomes important is, say that I have this problem here. I have 1/2 minus 1/3. So we have 1/2. And we need to figure out how to take 1/3 out of this. Now, if this was a division problem, this would be easy. We would just take this 1/2 and we would divide it into 3 sections, and then one of those sections would be our answer. Here, we're not trying to find what is 1/3 of 1/2, because that would be a multiplication problem. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find what is 1/3 less than 1/2. So 1/3 of a whole subtracted from 1/2 of a whole. That means that there's really no way to solve this problem because it's like they have different units at the bottom. You know, we can't subtract so many inches from so many centimeters without first making them have the same units. And that's kind of how you can think about common denominators, is you're trying to make your numbers have the same units. Okay, so going back to this problem, this 1/2 minus 1/3, how do we find the common denominator? The easiest way to find a common denominator, the most foolproof way, is to multiply the denominators by each other. So that means that we would take this 1/2 and we would multiply it by 3, both the top and the bottom, because whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So we multiply it by 3. And then we look at this one. Now we look at the 1/3 and we say, okay, we're going to multiply this by 2 because the denominator of this one is 2. So we multiply it by 2. This now gives us 2 new fractions. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. And 3 times 2 is 6. And now, because these two fractions have the same denominator, they're much easier to work with. Now we're doing 3/6 minus 2/6. So going back to this picture, now we have our circle divided into 6 because that's our denominator across the board. We have 3 of them colored in, and we're going to get rid of 2. And then really easily, we can see that that means that we have 1/6 left. Or just looking at 3 minus 2 gives us 1, and then carry the unit across, and that gives us an answer of 1/6. Okay, just to show you guys this process again, here's another problem. We have 2/5 plus 2/3 here. So once again, just multiplying it by the other fraction's denominator. So here we're going to multiply 2/5 by 3 because the denominator of the other fraction is 3. And then here we're going to multiply this 2/3 by 5 because the denominator of the other fraction is 5. So if we multiply 2 times 3, that will give us 6. 5 times 3, that will give us 15. plus 2 times 5, that will give us 10. And 3 times 5, that will give us 15. We just do the 6 plus the 10, that gives us 16. Carry over our unit or our denominator, which is 15. And that gives us our answer of 16/15. Now, obviously, this is an improper fraction. Sometimes that happens when adding fractions, as you guys know from previous work. So don't worry about it. You can simplify it if you want. So then that would be 1 and 1/15, depending on how the problem is asking for your answer. Okay, so we know that multiplying by the opposite denominator is always a foolproof way to find common denominators. However, it's not always the most practical or the most useful. If you look at this problem here, 3/8 plus 5/12, looking at multiplying 8 times 12, that gives us a denominator of 96. And sometimes you're going to have problems with denominators that big, but in this case, it's just going to make things more complicated and more jumbled up. So what you do is you start to see what multiples these numbers have in common. Okay, so what this looks like is you're gonna make kind of a chart with 8 and 12. And then you're going to go through each number, multiplying it like 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, and do the same thing with 12 a couple times to see if you come up with a number that they both have in common. So for instance, 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, 8 times 3 is 24, 8 times 4 is 32. And I'm going to stop there on that one. Now, when we do the 12s, it's just the same thing. So 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. And I'm actually going to stop there because I already see a number that they have in common. 8 times 3 gives us 24. And 12 times 2 gives us 24. So instead of multiplying just by the opposite denominator and getting a common denominator of 96, these two fractions can also have a common denominator of 24. So now when we come over here, instead of multiplying 3/8 by 12, we're just going to multiply 3/8 by 3. And that means that since 3 times 3 is 9, we put that here, and 3 times 8 is 24. And then when we come over here, instead of multiplying 5/12 by 8, we're just going to multiply 5/12 by 2. So 5 times 2 will give us 10. And we already know that 12 times 2 gives us 24. So now, instead of having to add these big numbers together and just make our problem more jumbled up, we're just going to add 9 plus 10, which will give us 19. Carry our unit or our common denominator, which is 24. And then that gives us our final answer, 19/24. Kind of similar to the last method, the last thing that I want to make you guys aware of is to make sure that you're not missing out on what I'm going to call like obvious common denominators. So for instance, when we look at this problem, 2/3 minus 1/9, I know that 9 can be divided by 3, or that 3 can easily be multiplied by 3 to get 9. So I don't even have to worry about multiplying them by each other or making a list. It's similar to making a list because obviously you would get to 3 times 3 and that would give you 9, and you would do 9 times 1 and that would also give you 9. But just looking and thinking, oh, I can just multiply this 2/3 by 3, and that will already give me the same common denominator as over here. So if you do 2 times 3 and 3 times 3, that gives us 6/9 minus 1/9. And then we could easily just do 6 minus 1 gives us 5 and carry over our common denominator or our unit of 9. And then that would give us our final answer of 5 times 9. All of these methods can be used pretty interchangeably. It's not a matter of like a right one for a problem or a wrong one for a problem. I just wanted to give you guys different ways to find it so that when you're working through these, you can find the method that works best for you and that works best for whatever problem you're working on. But yeah, so that's it on finding common denominators. I hope that helps you when you guys are adding and subtracting fractions this week. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or one of your other teachers. I hope that you guys are having a great week and that you're staying healthy and active. Remember to wash your hands and stay safe. And yeah, that's it. Bye, guys.